Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies, where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show John Bleasdale, who has written extensively on film, and his work has appeared in The Guardian, The Times, Variety, Sight and Sound, and The Economist. He is also the host of the Writers on Film podcast. John, welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, Robert. It's a real pleasure.
It's great to have you again, and we're doing something a little. I do a lot of book reviews, usually with the author of the book, as you know from when we talked about your Terrence Malick book. In this case, I couldn't bring on Michel Ciment because he passed away a few years ago. Obviously, I can't talk to him now. But this would so now you and I are doing something a little different where we're reviewing the book together. So this is a first for me. So we are reviewing a shared cinema. Michel Ciment conversations with I believe it's N.T. Binh. I don't know if you've met him or if you know him.
No, not to my knowledge, I don't, at least.
Okay.
There's always a vague possibility with attending so many film festivals that you sit across from people and you don't necessarily get their name. But yeah, no, not to my knowledge. But he's a great interviewer, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, he
It's a
was.
It's funny actually because reading the book, I was thinking of what you do, Robert, and what I do as well. And I kind of, because it's something you don't want to get too meta, but it's obviously where we both have interview podcasts,
Yeah.
and we're reading a book about interviews,
Yeah.
and the book, one of the people being interviewed, not the interviewer, the other person, is kind of famous for his interview books.
That's
So,
true. That's true. I didn't put that
so,
together.
so it's yeah. I was sort of thinking, wow, I'm falling down a rabbit hole. I'm Citizen Kane, sort of standing in the Hall of Mirrors here.
I didn't put that together. That's very true. But before we jump into the book, you had the opportunity to interview Michelle. I guess that was just before he passed away. What was that experience like?
It was wonderful. He was incredibly generous. He was very. I had to phone him on his landline and kind of put the phone on speaker and record. He wasn't going to do Zoom
Oh, okay.
Meet or anything like that. So he was just like, just phone me, phone me, and we'll record an interview from there. And so I did, and I had two sort of reasons for this. One, I wanted to record him for my own podcast, Writers on Film,
Hmm.
and I was, I guess, I mean, this will be the experience of many people, I think, who know his work. The first experience I had was his Kubrick book,
Right. You mentioned
which
that in the interview. Yeah.
yeah, I got out of the library when I was a kid, and I probably sixth form college, so it's the first time, 16, 17, the first time you're really thinking about cinema in any way that's serious, and reading books about it and treating it in that interesting way. And he gives you permission to do that. So I really wanted to talk to him, to have him on the show, but I also wanted to talk to him because he was one of the very few people who interviewed Terrence Malick
Hmm.
before Terrence Malick sort of stopped giving interviews or stopped giving published interviews. And so I wanted to talk to him about that for the book so that I could use his insights, um, and put them in the book as a sort of eyewitness to Malick in the 70s, around about, Chirka Days of Heaven.
Hmm.
And that was, and he was enormously, he's, you can kind of see this from the book as well. He speaks in paragraphs. He
Yes.
has this, you know, phenomenal way of cogitating and bringing together an idea and delivering it in a way that, I imagine the transcript needed very little editing here, because I've talked to him live, and I could hear the voice as I was reading the book.
Hmm. Well, one thing about the book that really floored me, because for anyone who doesn't know, Sticking Place Books are the ones who are releasing these books of interviews with various film scholars, critics, and historians. And Michel Ciment was the first one, and a lot of them are more autobiographical. But his he it is to an extent autobiographical, but a lot of it is just his opinions on film. And my God, this he has a lot of great opinions, and he really made me think about cinema in different ways. And I just couldn't believe how much he's done. From like he was a high school teacher, he's a critic naturally, a writer, a lecturer. He sat on juries at film festivals. He made documentaries. Um, his books, of course, are his interview books are what he's most famous for, I believe. I just couldn't believe how much he's done and how well informed he is on cinema and so many different topics. I mean, the cover of the book is him just in front of all these books. I mean, I don't know how in one lifetime this man accumulated this much knowledge. I don't know if that was your impression, but that was just the first thing that stood out to me was, my God, this man is he knows his stuff. That's for sure.
I mean, this is the sort of pre-internet intellectual that you
Yeah.
get, which is someone who, I mean, he says it himself, you go to the library, you read the articles, you read the books before you do an interview, or before you even write a feature, or before you do the research. That's like one of his main things. And I think the connection between that and his academic background is interesting, because it's you can't stand in front of a classroom of people and just wing it. You have to
Mm,
you have to know that your stuff in order to be able to communicate it and be able to be doing good, to be passing on information, not disinformation. And in a way, that also what you said earlier as well, the idea that wow, he really has these judgments on films.
yeah.
He has the sort of courage of his opinions. It is because I think in a way he doesn't really think they're opinions. He thinks they're views and judgments that he's come to from a series of positions. And if you follow his thinking, then how can you not say that this film is,
Right.
or this filmmaker is fundamentally, yeah, marvelous. I mean, he was on the jury when Ermanno Olmi won the Palme d'Or for the Tree of Wooden Clogs.
Right.
And he mentions in the book, he mentions that everybody in Cannes was saying, well, it's a great film, but it won't win because another Italian film won the year before. And
Right.
he's like, what does that matter? As far as he's concerned, you pick the best film and that's that. There's no,
That's it.
you
Yeah.
shouldn't, all those other considerations are just outside. But even there, he was interesting because there was all the idea of how do you play a jury? And I thought that sort of, I mean, maybe for a lot of people it'd be a little bit too much inside baseball, but I'm kind of, uh, you know, I think both of us have like we're the niche of the niche. So this is exactly the sort of stuff that I get very interested by.
Mm,
How is a film actually made? How does a jury actually deliberate?
yeah.
Those things. And he's the guy who was in the room
Right.
frequently when those things were happening. And of course, his position historically in cinema, he is right there before Truffaut, when Truffaut and Godard were rival journalists rather than film directors, and so he saw them grow and saw what they became, and he's got a unique perspective from that point of view.
Hmm. One thing that he mentions, which I didn't really know, is like because he talks. I mean, he really liked the new wave filmmakers, but he didn't like the myths that came from the new wave, which I didn't realize were myths. Like for example, that the French new wave kind of that the Cahiers critics came up with the auteur theory, but he was saying that people have been writing about that since the 20s. And I didn't know that. I always thought that yeah, they're the ones who invented. I mean, I think it became more formally written about with just from doing further research with but it's with the Cahiers. But it's true that kind of goes back to the 20s, which I didn't know. I always thought that that myth was what was absolutely true. I don't know.
Uh,
Yeah,
it's
sorry, go
kind
ahead.
of a yeah, no, it's just a form of taxonomy, really. You give it a French name and suddenly it's aha. It's like
Yeah, exactly.
film noir exists before the word film noir exists. It's
Right, right.
it's crime films and gangster films. Auteurs, I mean Charlie Chaplin, what is D.W. Griffiths, and they're self-projecting as the authors of their films. They're not. They're absolutely building up. I'm not. Wouldn't even say the myth of them being the authors because well, especially Chaplin, writes the music himself, directs every actor on the set by making them imitate him. So they everything in that film has that vision. Despite, obviously with the caveat that there's lots of talent around them as they're doing it and facilitating them. Not every filmmaker does it to that degree as well, so there's different levels, but he's really interesting in that point. It also, looking at how films are made and how people coming from different backgrounds have different approaches, and it's yeah, I found all that stuff. So I think we as anglophile, yeah, anglophonic writers and critics, I think we will probably, that's not the right word. Anglophone is the word I was looking for. Anglophonic. Um, we tend to maybe be a little bit intimidated by the French when it comes to they are the people who constantly declare cinema is dead. They are the people who take this stuff very seriously and scribble things, and and have these theoretical terms, and they have the philosophers who take film seriously, like Deleuze and others. And we don't really have that in Britain and America, and I'm less sure about America and Canada, but certainly in Britain, I don't feel we have like philosopher writers about film.
Right.
Um, we're more journalists who review stuff and who talk to people, and that's changing. I mean, film is more of an academic subject now than it ever has been,
Yeah.
as even though it's sort of dissipated into sort of more global media studies or screen-based studies or something of that nature. But yeah, it's so I think we are a little bit, and Michel Ciment he's the insider who is sort of saying, no, you're kind of pulling my leg here. You know he's French, so he can speak. He's speaking he's not depending on subtitles. He can hear their voices, and he
Yeah.
can he can say, well, I knew you guys when you were in short pants, and
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
I'm not going to kowtow to your declarations. I'm going to
Right.
ask you, what do you really mean by that? Are you sure? And
Hmm.
especially, I think Kaya's sort of absolutely dismissed whole swathes of cinema.
Yes, yes.
In, and I mean, one of his real points here is how the Kaye's bunch were very much concentrated on American cinema and French cinema from the Nouvelle Vague on.
Right.
They dismissed French cinema prior to that, pretty
Yes,
much,
yes.
and they liked neorealism, but they didn't really look at German cinema. They looked at a couple of Japanese films. But the idea that we have today of international cinema was not being taken in, and that's where he saw Postif and his own sort of mission as being much more international, much more
Yeah.
broad.
Yes.
Um, and I was kind of nodding my head quite vigorously as I was reading through those sections.
Yeah, Truffaut, was I mean again, he admired Truffaut, but Truffaut was like would say something like there are no good British films. Like like how could he say that with the all the great British new wave films and there's so many amazing filmmakers. How could he say that? But that's one thing he said about Truffaut was that he was only interested in certain countries or certain films, and I was like, yeah, that's true. When you think about it, that actually is true.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and And I mean, Truffaut had his blind spots, and he had his, again, it's this sort of, it's what makes him a really good writer and a really entertaining writer, is you kind of want vigorous opinions that you can bump up against.
Yeah.
He had this thing about like Doctor No was the moment where cinema just lost it completely, because this was the first film that was just utterly a fantasy, and it was ludicrous, and it was the death of a certain type of film. And it reminded me of Virginia Woolf sort of saying, sometime in the beginning of the 20th century, everything changed in man's soul. And it's like the birth of modernism happened. And it's just such a wild thing to say. And good for him, but you know, kind of also there's a lot to be said for those genre populist movies which everybody was going to see, and just dismissing them, to me, it's the new wave becoming the old wave all of a sudden, and not protecting itself from influences it doesn't want to succumb to.
Mm. Well, another thing that he really fascinated me was that he talks about how critics don't, if you think about Citizen Kane, you think about the images of Rosebud. So many classic films we think of like a certain image pops into your mind, and he was talking about how critics don't write enough about style and images in films, that they write more from a literary perspective, which is is probably true, because I know myself, I can struggle with talking about the style, because sometimes he did that documentary film on Mankiewicz, Joe Mankiewicz, and his whole thing was that you don't see the style, that it's all completely, which is more of the classical approach, whereas classic Hollywood, you don't see what the director's doing at all. So it can be hard to, from a critic's, at least for me, I find it hard sometimes to talk about style, unless it really pops. Like obviously in the case of Kubrick, it really, really pops, so it's easier to write about. I was curious, just your opinion on that. Do you find that to be true, that people speak more from a literary perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think, just to start on the Kubrick thing, I don't think people were seeing what we see in Kubrick until we got Simon's book, because
Mm-hmm.
Simont put those images side by side of things that nowadays you see on the internet, as if, every 5 minutes, as if somebody's rediscovered the wheel, which is like the Kubrick stare, or
Yeah.
Scatman Crover's sort of, that upward looking thing that he does, and Pyle does, and Alex does, and or the symmetry, everybody is like, oh, it's back to camera, somebody are walking away in silhouette, and you have Sicario, Mad Max, and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Dunkirk, or whatever, frame, 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 and
Mm.
I see it, it's the same shot. Um, that actually starts with some of those books where those images were put together. Whereas,
Right.
commonly, if you read Cinema of Loneliness by Robert Kolker, images, just as in, this is a picture from the film I'm talking about, not here's a picture and look what it's doing.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Walter Murch's new book, or not new actually, it's about a year old. Suddenly something clicked. His new book has QR codes in them that you can actually photograph on your phone and go to YouTube to the clips that he's specifically talking about. So you can watch the clip as you read the book, or, go back and forwards to illustrate it. And that's just
Mm.
a phenomenal idea. That's why don't all film books do that? Because of course you send people back to the films and say, see, it's right there in front of you.
Yeah.
Um, I personally, when it comes to writing about style, and I thought it was really interesting what you say as well about, uh, we tend have a tendency to look at Hollywood's style as being styleless, and that's a little bit like saying, a newscaster hasn't got an accent. Nobody hasn't got an accent. We've all got accents. Just some accents are marked as accentless, and they
Right.
tend to be, BBC English tends to be a certain middle class way of saying things. But that doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from the south of England. It doesn't come from the north of England.
Right. Right.
Um, broadcast is it broadcast and broadcast orthodox or broadcast accent from in America is sort of like a San Diego. It's Ron Burgundy from Anchorman sort of accent.
Right.
But
Right.
so the same is true of film directors. I One of my favorite film directors is Michael Curtiz,
Yeah.
and people will often say, well, he's never discussed as an auteur, partly because he does so many different types of films, partly because he's filming, he's not editing, he's not writing his own stuff. But visually, his style is essentially dictates what Warner Brothers does
Yes. The
for the whole of that century.
right. Right.
You know, so you look at it's multi-layered, it's filling the frame, it's got a real depth of field. He's doing, you watch Mildred Pierce or Casablanca or The Adventures of Robin Hood, and there's style,
Yeah.
in buckets. It's just the style feels like it's the house style, even though, that makes no sense. It's still a style and it's still
Yeah.
authored.
Right. Yeah. That really fascinated me, and I just wanted to read a little bit of something he said about the style of images and ideas, the mix of those two, because he talks about Balzac. Um, yeah, he goes this there's the style of images, which is that of D. Chateaubriand. There's the style of ideas as exemplified by Stendhal, but there's also a third style where the image connects to the idea, in which Balzac claimed as his own way of doing things. Of course, he took the opportunity while praising Stendhal to place himself on a pedestal. Many of the filmmakers I admire are in this third category. Filmmakers like Rivette have a style of ideas, and others like Tarantino have a style of images. And then there are those who blend images with ideas. Once again, I come back to Kubrick. You can imagine a filmmaker like, say, Luc Besson, who in a science fiction film would include a shot of a bone flying up in the sky and a shot of a spaceship. But there's this extraordinary moment in Kubrick's 2001 where the bone that the primate throws up into the sky is transformed with an edit into the spaceship. It's a leap in time of thousands of years, a way of showing that the great stages of humanity are tied to technology. The bone is an instrument of power and death, which the monkey uses to kill the tapir. Then, thousands of years later, comes the conquest of space. The juxtaposition of these two images triggers an idea. I read that over and over again because I thought, I was trying to think. That's sort of an obvious example with what he. I thought that was a very good example, the one he brings up from 2001: Space Odyssey. But I was thinking about this, ideas and images tie together, and I was just wondering, like, do other examples come up for you when you read that? What he's getting at? Is he basically getting at that you put a couple of images together that they say so much, as opposed to using more dialogue or
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. There is a. I mean, I was thinking of Citizen Kane and how the different architectures work. Essentially, you've got a journey of a man who's investigating, trying to find out the meaning of a word, which will be linked to an object in the end. And they
yes,
think, is it an object? Is it a person? Is it they think it's probably a person. Rosebud's got to be the name of somebody, or maybe a place. Um, and they go to these different settings and they meet these different people. And the way Kubrick and Toland, Wells and Toland are photographing those different places, seems to reflect the characters These are people who are, one's in an old person's home and there's sunshine behind him. A woman is in a nightclub and it's raining on the glass and people are talking in the phones and it's smoky and it's
Right.
almost like he's coming. There's all these vignettes, and then of course you have all the flashbacks and everything, all the activity of Wells himself as Kane. Um, and that film is just so full of style, doing so many things. Now, of
Mm.
course, it's intensely verbal because um, Wells was the first to make a Robert Altman film where everybody is talking at the same time,
Yeah.
and there's that famous scene where there's a song and dance, and he's celebrating hiring all the new journalists, so they're all having a big dinner in the offices, and he put the microphones in the flower arrangements so that he could record them all speaking. They didn't have to have boom mics. They could all be at the table speaking and saying different things without a microphone moving around.
Right.
um so he's got that soundtrack, which is like obviously the radio plays he was really good at, but there is that, he doesn't he that there is that just purely filmic uh ability which doesn't have any words at all, such as the
Right.
prologue,
Right.
and such as the ending. It's almost like when things when the chatter dies down, the film sort of takes over, and
Mm.
you
Mm.
get you know and you even get the sort of film with the chatter when film has become just chatter, which is like the newsreel, the March of Time section, where
Yes.
it's just pumping away and it's not really, you're learning a lot. It's the best exposition dump ever
Yes.
in
Yes.
cinema.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
you're also seeing something which is a pastiche, a parody, a bastardization of visual media. It's just,
Mm.
it's just pouring out at you. If you come in late, you're thinking, hang on a minute, I think everybody's first feeling when they're watching that film, the first time you watch Citizen Kane, during that sequence is, first of all, is this ever going to end? It goes on forever. And secondly, is this the film? Are we watching? Is this the film actually
Yes.
starting,
Yes.
or
That's right.
have I? Is it Mars is attacking? Is it we being faked? But so I mean, sorry, I keep giving you very long answers, but
No. 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 They're great.
but I mean, yeah, Wells, Kubrick. We're talking about the biggies here, but there are. I mean, Tarkovsky. I mean,
Ah. Yeah.
who you just see a field and wind blowing through it, and you understand that something has just been said visually to you.
Right.
Malick in Thin Red Line, when the sun lights up the different parts of the hills one after the other, and it's kind of the most gorgeous, beautiful thing you've ever seen. On one level, on another level, it could be like God's presence. He's watching us. And on another level, it could be, oh shit, we're now sitting targets. The minute we stand up, anyone can see us for miles because the sun's bright. We've got no, visibility is against us. Very practical military point of view, and that runs all the way through that film. There's
Mm.
so many layers contending with each other. Um, yeah, and that image, that one image, has done three things. And when something does three or four things at the same time, usually that's poetry. Usually
Right.
that's that multivalency that you have is um that's when cinema really sort of becomes, its best. By the way, the match cut between the bone and the spaceship is even more literal than because in the novel it's very clear that spaceship is supposed, or in the script, sorry, the spaceship is a nuclear weapon,
Mm.
which is part of the it's like one of the orbiting nuclear
Oh.
weapon
Right.
platforms. So it's
Right.
sort of like, this is a weapon and here's another
Another
weapon.
weapon. Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. That was one page. I just I can't. I mean, I got the gist of what he was saying, but I was like, I just wanted to think of some other examples to really hit it home for me. So thank you for that. Obviously Kubrick comes up a lot in the book, and one thing he said about Kubrick, which is it's probably true. Most filmmakers, you can see who their influences were, and then you can see who then they later influenced. And he goes, with Kubrick, you can't really see who influenced him and then who he later influenced, because there's just no one. His films don't look like anybody else's. The only one that I thought maybe he overlooked was Matt was Ophal's, uh, because there's certainly an influence there on Kubrick. That was the only person I thought, you could see a similarity. But other than that, I thought that's true. Like who today is like the Kubrick like. No one says, "Oh, this guy's Kubrick-esque," like we do with Fellini or
Oh,
Lynch.
Kubrickian. No,
Kubrickian.
I would disagree. I think I
Oh,
mean
okay.
I'm not entirely sure if they win the I think Yorgos Lanthimos aspires to Kubrick. He uses his font for some of his the Full Metal
Oh, okay.
Jacket, sort of that very
Oh,
uh,
okay. I'll have to I'll look him up.
yeah. Yorgos Lanthimos has done The Killing of a Sacred Deer,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
uh,
yes, of course, of course. The name just in.
Begonia.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So Emma Stone.
Eg- Yeah, Emma Stone's
He
husband,
loves Emma Stone.
essentially. Yeah. I mean, Emma Stone is married to somebody else, so
Right.
probably not, but still. Uh, but there is a real. He also is accused, like Kubrick, of having this coldness, of this sort of
Mm,
superiority to his characters. He certainly likes distancing himself from his characters, having his characters speak at a pace which is not as I'm thinking especially of The Lobster and the two Colin Farrell ones. Lobster and The Killing of the Sacred Deer are both films which have a coldness to them and a distance to them, and the
mm,
way the dialogue is given, they're not acted in they're acted in a different register to normal English language film acting.
mm,
Um, I think the Emma Stone ones are a little bit different. They've changed a little bit to some degree, complement her style as well. Um, and he is doing many more sort of scripts that he hasn't necessarily written. So I mean, The Favorite was a project that he was basically brought on as a director for hire rather than the other person I would say has a very is influenced hugely by Kubrick, Jonathan Glazer.
ah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the beginning of Under the Skin is a direct quote from 2001: A Space Odyssey, with the alignment of the planets, and in the film it becomes a creation of an eye. Um, Yeah, there's Tarkovsky in there as well, but there's a lot of Kubrick in Under the Skin. There's a lot of The Shining in Birth. In fact, Birth has The Shining. It has Barry Lyndon with the sort of the child kicking the chair during a musical performance, and an adult losing his status and everything because of his reaction to the child. The corridors, of course, The Shining, the bouncing of the ball, The Shining, the long tracking shot at the beginning, as a little bit of Shining. The actual concept of the story, an adult falling in love with a child, Lolita. Um,
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. Oh, yes.
Sexy Beast doesn't really have any Kubrick in it. I'm sure you could find a little reference here and there. Zone of Interest is kind of interesting because that's the Kubrick film that Kubrick didn't make. That's the Aryan Papers, um,
Oh, right.
which I mean, it's not literally the Aryan Papers, but I feel that if Kubrick had made his Holocaust movie, it's possible that it could have been, I mean, it's quoted in the book. His objection just to Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List was that's the film about how a German saves 3,000 lives, not about how a German kills 3 million Jews.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You mentioned that. Yeah.
Uh, which
Yeah.
is, yeah, which is kind of harsh, but kind of true, you
Right.
know. Um, I
I
was
know Ray. I'm sure you're familiar with Ray Carney, who did those Cassavetes books, and I mean, maybe it's kind of harsh, but he's like Schindler's List is basically Indiana Jones, and I was like, wow.
that's
but
yeah.
but in a way, he's right. You know, it's like the savior. It is sort of like a becomes like a commercial Hollywood story.
Oh, I think he loses it a little bit in the last reel.
Yeah.
I think there's a real, I think there's a Close Encounters feel to it as well. Of sort of
Mm,
the alien mothership is landing to take him away, and he's gonna,
right.
um, I, I, I don't know. It's really I'm not saying, it's really fashionable to knock Schindler's List. There's plenty of people who love Schindler's List and it will be up there. I am cautious about knocking Spielberg because I do feel his heart is in the right place. And I do feel people like Billy Wilder watched Schindler's List. And even though he
Yes.
wanted to direct it himself, said, I couldn't have directed it that well, that it needed Steven to do it.
Hmm.
So I kind of do have a lot of time, but at the same time, you guess you can definitely see the Hollywood coming through. And I read David Thompson's latest book. It's not published yet. I read it as in galleys, and he has a brilliant moment in that where he talks about um, the red coated little girl going through the black and white streets. And
Yes.
he describes it as being Spielberg nudging you in the cinema and going, hey, look, that's really sad.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
It's sort
Yes.
of like,
Yes.
you think this is sad, but
Right.
that, wait a second, this bit's really sad,
Right. Right.
and yeah, it's kind of inappropriate nudgery.
Yes. Yes.
We don't need the nudge. We
Right. No.
get it, we get it. We don't need Liam Neeson at the end to tell us to say I could have saved so many more.
Yeah. We get it.
You'd be more convincing if you were saying I did all I could, and I did all I
Yes.
could. What more do you want from me?
Right.
That's
Right.
more a human response.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there were, that was the Kubrick example, was one that came up that I thought I was curious what you thought of that, if there were any disagreements you may have had with Simon. The only other thing I thought, he talks about, because Cassavetes is my favorite filmmaker and he loves Cassavetes too.
Right.
But he was saying, but he doesn't get pleasure from the cinematography. And I thought, oh, hang on a second. I know
Oh,
what
go
he's
on.
saying. I know what
Go
he's
on, tell
saying.
tell us about that.
Yeah.
Say what do you think? Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
because
Gloria,
he's
I think is amazingly photographed,
oh, for
but
sure, yeah.
maybe some of those older films a little bit more basic, or what do you think?
Well, I think what he's because they're more sort of that rough cinematography, and he's not a picturesque kind of filmmaker. I mean, he's interested in human relationships and purely, and so. But one thing that Cassavetes said that I agree with, he goes, "What great cinematography is when you want to reach up to the screen and touch the faces, And I thought, yeah, that's exactly how you feel watching his films. Like, I mean, he loves these people so much that you just want to touch the faces. So I love that sort of documentary approach he had, and that rough cinematography like that you saw in Faces, and shadows, and it's, I mean, he always had that. It gets a little more polished as his budgets got bigger. But I thought that was one thing with Simon. I thought was one disagreement I had was he doesn't elaborate on as to why that is, but I think he gravitated more towards those filmmakers like Kubrick, who, where you sort of, they're visually appealing, really visually picturesque. They really sort of, the style really pops. But then again, I mean, he loved he did a film on Mankiewicz, right? And Mankiewicz is not was not picturesque stylist, right? So, but I see what he's getting at, but it's just one thing I thought for me, I mean I can look at those images and just put them on my wall from Husbands or Faces or so many of those movies. I don't know what you thought of that.
No, I agree, and I think I agree with you. I think I mean, there's a rough and ready aspect to Faces and Shadows where you can definitely feel he's there's a sort of economy of necessity. He's aesthetics of necessity. He's gonna shoot it, you know, down and dirty, and that's part of
Yes,
the
yes,
the appeal of it. And you can sort of see how that influences She's Gotta Have It and some other, you know, American filmmakers, or even someone like, say, Harmony Korine is sort of trying to get that into his movies. I mean, the problem is when somebody starts trying to get that into their movies rather than doing it as, you know, then it starts to look mannered. It starts to become an affectation. So that's something that's interesting in itself. But Cassavetes, in general, I think, as you say, when he can afford to get, Woman on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown or Opening Night are beautifully shot films. I
oh,
mean, I
absolutely,
wouldn't,
yeah,
I mean, the texture of those worlds are,
yeah.
I mean, that's what I think of when I
You
think
mean
of
A
beautifully
Woman Under the
shot.
Influence, right? A Woman Under the
Yeah,
Influence.
yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm getting my Almodovar mixed up with.
That's all right.
Yes, Woman Under the Influence, of
Yeah,
course. Killing of a Chinese Bookie, Woman Under the Influence, Gloria, I've already mentioned, Opening Night. All of those films, I feel, have really intensely realized worlds that come out at you from the camera, and
for sure.
that
Yeah.
that involves lighting schemes and it involves choice of lenses. It's not a window, a transparent window of
Right.
what we're looking through. um and yeah, I mean, the other names that he speaks about in the book and that he's dedicated books to, like Eli Kazan and
Yes.
Elia Kazan and Joseph Losey. I mean, Losey's films are incredibly textured and rich in terms of the world, the servant
Yeah.
and accident. I mean, he has this thing. It's quite funny because he sort of talks about going to visit Losey and saying how he goes into his apartment and it's a typical Losey space. And I
Mm.
just thought, oh, that's really interesting because there are those sort of middle class English, because Losey spent most of his working career in England, and it became very English, I think. There's something about a certain genteel clutter that he creates, and
Mm.
even in a film like Boom, you can sort of it's there's a clutter to it. These are rich people, but they've got stuff sort of lying around like props,
Mm.
samurai swords, and you know, so it's really, yeah, I liked that idea as well. And of course, that genteel clutter is a different thing to sort of Cassavetes' maybe more blue collar
Yes.
clutter.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Did you ever? I hit all of my notes. I don't know if you had any other final thoughts you wanted to mention about the a shared cinema.
Yeah, I there was a couple of things that I thought was really interesting. One was, well, we've sort of slightly touched upon it, which was sort of advice to critics and advice to
Oh, yes, at the end. Yeah.
interviewers. And sort of the idea of advice to critics was like, do your research.
Yeah.
And also, good critical writing had to pay attention to style in the film, but itself had to have good style. It had to be enjoyable, entertaining writing. That the style with which you write, again, get away from this idea that there's some transparent window that we can just put our thoughts through and you'll get them. You have to communicate them. You have to choose a lens and the lighting and the background and the thing and the thing. You do that with your prose, and I think that's really good. I think critics, we often talk about people finding their voice, but that voice doesn't necessarily have to be like your voice. You know, Kieran Hines, the actor, if you've ever hear him interviewed, he's got a really disappointing speaking voice. He's sort of like,
Hmm.
oh, hello, you know, he's he's Northern Irish, so that's his accent, that's his sort of default accent. And then when you see him in films and you hear him talk, it's like, wow, he's amazing. He just totally, commands the room. He's a commanding presence.
Mm.
And I think that's when your people say you should find your voice. I sort of think not necessarily. You should find your critic's voice. You should find
Mm.
your writing voice, not your voice.
Right.
Your voice is, leave that for the shopping list and
Yeah.
sort of stuff. So that was one thing I'd really interested, and I was really interested in the three rules of doing interviews, which was short questions,
Yes.
uh, don't be afraid of silence, and again, do your research. Those are the
Yeah.
three ones,
Those
and
are
I thought
perfect.
they're really good. Don't be afraid of silence. Don't jump in. If somebody's thinking, let them think.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. No, that's a great lesson because I know that because I can always maybe it's common, but I know for me, like if I'm interviewing someone and there's a pause, like I always, there's that instinct of oh God, there's it's getting awkward. You better say something, but you just got to breathe because you're right. They might just be thinking of what to say or collecting themselves, so you have to let those moments happen.
exactly, and the word actually, I tell you a funny story. The first person I ever interviewed for who was a filmmaker, was Yorgos Lanthimos.
Oh wow.
And he had done his third film, which was called Alps at the Venice Film Festival. And I went in and I said I did this huge I didn't interview him well. I did this huge long question and he went, yeah, that's right. That's what the film's about.
Oh God.
And so I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't. What was one of the questions was, oh, I noticed nobody watches TV in the movie. And he goes, yeah, nobody goes whale fishing either.
Yeah.
What's
Oh
that?
no.
And it just every question just was falling. It's kind of like what I hadn't done is anticipated how someone might, you know, it's it's not a bad idea to think what could somebody hearing this feel about that question,
Mm.
because
Yes.
I
Yes.
sometimes hear people in junkets especially say questions which are it's just like, can you hear what you're saying? That's rude. What you just said
Right.
is rude.
Yeah, and then
um
they get shared all over the internet.
yeah, precisely. One of my experiences was being with Jeff Goldblum, and someone said, are you really crazy or is it just an act?
Oh my God.
I could tell you more, but I shan't.
Oh God, you could watch those all day. Crazy questions and junkets. Well, again, the book is called A Shared Cinema: Michel Cimon's Conversations with N.T. Binh. I hope I have this right. Binh, Binh. I hope I have that correct. It's a wonderful book. I'll leave the link in the description box where you can get it directly from Sticking Place Books. John, if people want to follow you online, or where's the best place for them to go?
You can find me on Blue Sky. Just my name, John Bleasdale, should bring me up from there. Um, I also have a book available from Sticking Place, which is on the cinema of Jonathan Glazer.
Yes.
Um, and I have a new novel which has been published by plumeria.co.uk. So those are things you can explore if you wish.
Great, fantastic. I'll leave the link in the description box for where you can follow John online, and also I'll leave the link to our interview about his Terrence Malick book, which I really really enjoyed. And actually, the next book I have on my list is your Glazer book, so I'll have to have you back for that.
Oh, definitely. I can. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that, Robert.
Great. Well, thanks again. This was such a pleasure. Thanks for coming on, and we'll of course do it again sometime soon.
Pleasure's all mine.
Uh,
Thanks.
Thank you. And those of you watching at home, thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. It is absolutely free to subscribe. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you are interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, I'd really appreciate the support. Please go to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the Movies for full details. Thank you again, everyone, for watching, and I will see you all in the next episode.